fifth webinar of EPNoSL VIP, the virtual platform of the European Policy Network on School Leadership. My name is Nóra Révai and I'm going to host this session today. EPNoSL VIP is a series of programs including webinars and forum discussions on different topics on school leadership. Forum discussions take place on the EPNoSL portal. There you will also find the full program of the virtual platform. All activities are open to anyone interested. If you also wish to contribute to the discussion, you need to register on the EPNoSL portal. Our topic today is distributed leadership, one concept, different understandings, and we are going to address this topic with the help of three speakers, Olof Johansson from Sweden, Uljens from Finland, and Petros Pashiardis from Cyprus. But before I introduce our speakers and before we start, let me just very quickly show you some features of this webinar platform. So you will always see the person who is speaking. Other web cameras and microphones will be inactive. At the bottom right-hand corner, you can see a chat box, which you will be able to use to ask your questions during and after the presentations. I would like to encourage everyone to start discussing and asking questions already during the presentation, so use the chat box for that. You can also use the whisper button if you would like to send private messages to people. You just have to select whisper from the drop-down menu where it says say now, and then you select the participant to whom you would like to send a private message to. At the bottom left-hand corner, you have some emoticons that you can use. At the give feedback, you just have to press the give feedback button, and then you can choose, for example, laughing. That's what I chose now. It appears next to my name. You can also try it out, and then if you want to put it back, then you press I am fine. The webinar is going to be recorded, and the session will then be published on the EPNoSL portal. And as your feedback is very important to us, we would be very grateful if you could dedicate a few minutes after the webinar to give us feedback. I will put you the link of the questionnaire in the chat box. So after the webinar, you can just click on this link and give us feedback. And let us start now. I would like to introduce you our first speaker, Olof Johansson, who is a professor of political science and chair of the Center for Principal Development at Umeå University in Sweden, and a member of the Board of Governors for the UCEA Center for the Study of Leadership and Ethics. His research interests are school leadership, values and ethics in relation to school leadership, school governance, school effectiveness and improvement, and policymaking and democratic processes. He is currently working on 4 large international research projects, and he and his center is also a partner of the International Superintendents Research Network, ICRN. So, Olof, I would like to give the floor to you.
Okay, I'm in. Thank you, Nóra, for the introduction. And I would like to start by saying that when we decided to do this seminar on distributed leadership, I was lucky enough to have 2 colleagues, one from Finland and one from Cyprus here. And we discussed if we could give different perspective of the case of distributed leadership. And that's what we're going to do. I'm going to start, and then Michael going to speak, and Petros in the end, and then we hope that we will have comments from you all. The Swedish way of looking at, or before I say that, I say I have no PowerPoint, but there is a paper which I wrote which discuss what I see as one of the challenging with distributed leadership in Sweden. The Swedish curricula talks very much about the democratic school system. It talks very much about the democratic principle. Still, when we got the new school law in 2010, the role of the principal was highlighted very, very much. In the old law, the principal was mentioned in about 20 paragraphs directly that he had tasks to do and fulfill. In the new school law there is about 100 or maybe a little more tasks that is directly linked to the principal, which means that the principal's role is highlighted and it's made more important than it used to be. We also did a study on school politicians and asked them what they thought would happen in the future, and 60%, little more, said that the principal's role will be strengthened and more important. So the principal is a very important person. In the new school law, they also give the principal right to distribute leadership. And the law has been there for 3 years now. And the paragraph is saying that leadership in schools can be distributed to other persons who they think have the competence to take up the task and responsibility that the principal wants to distribute. You can in one way say that this is new. It's a way that the state or the government wanted to enforce principals to do this kind of distribution of leadership. But going back, you could say that in schools that are working well, there has always been a distributed leadership. They have always shared responsibilities for different tasks, but the principal has been responsible all the time. And I think in our country there is a, I would say, misunderstanding, or there is a challenge, because we talk a lot about delegated leadership instead of distributed leadership. And when you delegate something, you also delegate responsibility. And I think it's important to remember that we are talking about delegating responsibility over task, not really delegating the power in the end, or the responsibility in the end. So you can distribute responsibility for developing competences plans for the staff, or you can distribute responsibility for helping students in the intervals and stuff like that. But it's very difficult to see what is actually the principal wants to distribute. And in the paper I write about this, and I find it's a lot of a values question, in that sense that if you should distribute responsibility to a person, you need to know that that person is going to fulfill the task in the ways you want it to be fulfilled. So you have to know for sure that you have a value agreement, you have an agreement on certain visions for the schools, and you have to also have an agreement that as a principal or as a person you will defend the borders of the school and the school mission. And when I look at put distributed leadership into the theories of values, I clearly found that it's probably there the problem lies. We have asked Swedish principals 3 years after the law, when they got the possibility to distribute leadership, how many have used the law to distribute leadership, and only about 30% of them said that yes, we have done it and we have made distribution of leadership. And when I ask them why they haven't used it more, they sometimes say we want to be in control. Other times they say, yeah, we have tried to do it, but it doesn't really work out that way. People doesn't want to take the responsibility. So I think it's a process that will take some time to create real distributed leadership in Sweden. But saying that, I also want to remember you what I said earlier, that I think a school that works well always have had distributed leadership. So in that sense, we now have the tools, we have the law, we can distribute leadership, but there are problems around it. And I think a lot of the problems is that the responsibility still lies with the principal, and there are a lot of ethical problems. And I think also that schools in Sweden more and more are multicultural. They have a lot of discussions about what is right and wrong in the schools, and there are ethical considerations and a lot of discussions. In the paper I have one figure where I talk about responsibility, authority and action as an inner triangle, and I think most of the work your principal do in the school is down there. It's you take responsibility, you have the authority to do it, and you take action. But from time to time you have to take another triangle which is on top of this triangle. So responsibility and authority, you understand that there is an ethical dimension to it, and you must have some kind of ethical control, and then you take the action. And I think this is where the problem lies a bit, that the principals are not sure that these kind of dimensions will work with the people that they distribute leadership to. And I think it's very important that we control this. The other figure I have in the paper that show this is that I think that being a principal is very much about border settings, and it's also about dialogue. So it's the two important dimensions, that you say what you need to say, and you also have dialogue. If you are able to do both, you could probably say that you are a democratic leader, and you are able to work with your staff in a very good way. If you just do the border setting and have no dialogue, you will have an authoritarian leadership style, which is not what we want to have. But on the other hand, if you just have the dialogue but you never set the borders, you will have some kind of laissez-faire discussions, and I think that is also not really what we want. So the trick to be a good principal is to just be able to both have the dialogue setting and the border setting in place. And I think a lot of principals are not sure that this will work good if they distribute it too much. But I think it will come. I will think we will have a development in Sweden that we will see more and more distributed leadership now when the law is in place. And I think I stop there and give over to Michael.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now you can hear me.
Yes, just a second, Michael. So I would like to introduce our second speaker, Michael Uljens, who's been a professor of education and educational leadership for 10 years at the Swedish-speaking Akademi University in Finland. Michael has previously worked with teacher education and instructional theory, but also educational philosophy at several Nordic universities, Vasa, Jyväskylä, Helsinki, Umeå, and Göteborg, as well as the Humboldt University in Berlin. He has been the dean for his faculty since 2010, but is now leading a research program on leadership for school development. So, Michael,
my approach in this short presentation to educational leadership and the concept of distributedness is somewhat different to Olof's. I want to raise some conceptual and theoretical perspective concerning this, but I also think when we look at the problem of distributed leadership in Finland, I think one of the most important things is that we are, as I said in the heading, we are moving toward new collaborations between policy making, governance, practice and research. So to start, I start with a quite traditional European way of understanding the relation between. I think we have to have a macro perspective on leadership and a micro organizational perspective on leadership. So I would say the first way of understanding the distributedness has to do that it's distributed over two topics. The first is how is the relation between school and society defined? The second is how is the relation within the school organized, the leadership, teaching, studying, learning process. I call it that way. And I won't go into an explanation, but I think many of the European countries share the the 6 points I try to describe, how we see the relation and the task of the school. So the leadership cannot be disconnected from the task. A second way of viewing distributedness is to recognize that leadership occurs on different levels. I call it the first order educational leadership, second order, and the third order leadership. The teacher leads the students, the principal leads teachers teaching, which is completely different, of course, and superintendents leads the leaders. And so that's also a way of understanding distributedness. Nothing radical there. On all these three different levels, we can say that leadership, as distributed leadership, has to do with mediation. We as educational leaders, we mediate between value systems, as you can see, between politics and ethics. Politics has to do with the relation between our organization and the outer world. Ethics is more directed to leadership within the organization. But we also mediate between, as I say, between epistemic fields, pedagogics, culture, technology, and in this space I see leadership as a kind of hermeneutic process. Also teaching occurs and works this way. So that is to say that through mediation, I as a leader, I have the possibility to create a shared vision by keeping these different elements together. Distributedness can also be seen as something located as on vertically and horizontally and also diagonally between different levels over, as I say, interconnected professionalities and societal and organizational practices. And here I would say that the transnational level is something we don't really understand quite well yet, but we are all facing this dilemma. But a lot of leadership has concentrated from an organizational perspective very much on the school. But well, I think there is a growing awareness that we have to approach these problems in a multi-level perspective to give a more complete picture. I previously have been working with instructional theory and teacher education. That's where I come from. From there I moved over to philosophy of education. But when I came into this field of educational leadership quite recently, just five years ago something, I realized that what I had been working with in the 90s with what I call school didactics, Schuldidaktik in Germany. I have spent some, the Finnish tradition is strongly influenced by the German tradition, but still I by this model I only want to point one thing out, and that is that distributed leadership, as I write there, can be seen. We see it's working in a culturally and historically developed institutions, and that is also an important thing, I think, when we see the concept of distributedness. But also distributedness can be seen as a reflection located in different types of it include different types of reflection. The first is the practical. If you look at educational leadership practice, it's in an intentional activity, reflected activity. You create your subjective theories, but sometimes they do not work. Our private theory, subjective reflected experience, doesn't work. We can problematize them, we can be provocated, there are new policies introduced, we have to start reflecting. We can carry out this reflection in dialogue with the surrounding world, with others, our colleagues, with the teachers, or we can construct fields where we can, the principals, for example, can be in dialogue with other principals. We can, of course, include research, and what is new and increasingly important is, of course, the policy-based evaluation data, which is now called evidence-based. And I would say that one of our problems is that we have built up an educational system based on a research, on an academic tradition. But now we have a new kind of data coming in all the time, and that is policy-based evaluation data. So how should we understand the leadership as a profession in relation to both this academic knowledge base and in relation to the policy-based evaluation data? Yeah, I have to. My time is running out, but I would say I went up with this figure, and I just want to point out that in Finland, I would say as a conclusion that we are moving from the field 3 to 4 in the upper right corner. There is an ongoing professionalization of leadership, moving more towards a research-based and a data-informed school and professional development culture. And I think we didn't move into this new public management tradition which has been occupying so many countries. We didn't accept that, but so I tried by this figure to show that we are moving from an academic traditional way of understanding teaching and leadership towards new forms of collaboration between the universities, practice and policy making. Thank you. Or do I have still? No, I have still time. I have time. Okay. I misjudged my time. So I then would say that this is a picture I could end up with by saying that at traditionally universities on the right side we have carried out basic research on scientific grounds. Now I can see that we are trying to move to the left to number 4. I can see more development oriented and interventional research, more action oriented research. And I can also see that our Ministry of Education and national authorities reconceptualize the role of the university to serve better the educational practice. On the other hand, if you look on the left side, on the number 1, what I write on the state side, so to speak, developmental work has often been done in relation to the practitioner's own interest, and of course in relation to new curriculums and new policies. But there we have moved from policy-based developmental work to the number 2, which I called research and evidence-based developmental work. And I see that maybe we should think more about how to merge these two fields. How can we find new models where educational developmental work is research-based, it's evidence-based, but where schools are not completely subordinated with respect to policies, that we reserve sufficient degrees of freedom for reflection and decision making on the local schools and on the local municipal level, so to speak. And how can we support a more school-based, a more site-based idea of leadership development, school development, teachers' professional development, where school development and professional development goes together. So we are engaged in Finland in a number of projects, both in Jyväskylä and in Vaasa, concerning these issues. I have also a list of ongoing movements in this direction, but I think that these two last slides sum up some of what I've tried to say. So I think I finish here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. I would like to present our third speaker, Petros Pashiardis, who is a professor of educational leadership at the Open University of Cyprus. Petros studied educational administration at the University of Texas at Austin as a Fulbright scholar. In 2008, he co-edited the International Handbook on the Preparation and Development of School Leaders together with Jackie Lundy and Gary Krah. This month, his new book is coming out from Springer Publications, titled Modeling School Leadership Across Europe in Search of New Frontiers. For the period 2004-2008, Professor Pashiardis has been president of the Commonwealth Council for Educational Administration and Management. So, Petros, the floor is over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Nóra, for this introduction. I think I will divert also a little bit from what my colleagues have said, even though to some extent I will make reference to Olaf's diagram that he presented previously when it has to do with dialogue and border setting of the school leader. Now, in my case, I decided that it's better to present the models that were developed by two research projects in which I take part. One is the LISA project, the other one is the ISSPP project. I will explain later what it is, and then end by discussing distributed leadership and Cyprus principles, which I call the act of benevolent cohabitation. In a sense, that's how I see distributed leadership in Cyprus. Now, coming from a small island nation, I thought it would be a good idea to show where Cyprus is, and of course in relation to Sweden and Finland. I'm quite far away, I think, both culturally as well as administratively or organizationally, if I make this jump. Now, giving you a bit of a background, Cyprus is very different than both Finland and Sweden in the sense that it is a highly centralized education system. Centralized in all sorts and all forms of ways. That is, it is centralized in the way that the allocation of monies takes place, and that means that school leaders in Cyprus have very little money to deal with, let alone distribute it to some functions of the schools. Then the system is very centralized in the personnel management. To give you an idea, personnel is placed at a particular school by a central committee in Cyprus, independent of the Ministry of Education, and this 5-member committee decides who goes where. So the school leader almost has nothing to say about the personnel that is sent to his or her school. And to give you an example, on a yearly basis, a school leader may see his or her staff change by at least 1/3. So imagine how you can have distributed leadership when your personnel, 1/3 of your personnel has changed from year to year. And then the curriculum, of course, is quite centralized as well, given to all the schools by the Ministry of Education, and they are obligated to follow through. So that gives you an idea of the context and the environment in which school leaders in Cyprus operate. So what about successful school leadership in Cyprus? Well, from a research project, the ISSPP, in which Cyprus is a participant, the ISSPP is the International Successful School Leadership School Principalship Project, which is directed by Christopher Day at the University of Nottingham, and we've been taking part in the last few years as researching schools from Cyprus. Now, this is what we came up with, that successful school principals in Cyprus promote learning, that is, they are the pedagogical leaders and the main instructional actors at their school level, by encouraging their teachers to be risk-taking and experimenting when teaching. Then they operate using another domain, so to speak, network leadership, which means involving outside factors outside the school in the everyday organization and administration and running of the school. Then going into the other circle, they are people-centered, so they really give a lot of emphasis on the relationships which develop within the school. Cyprus being a small island nation and almost everybody knowing each other by name, face, on a daily basis, it is school leaders in Cyprus feel it is very, very important to be very much interpersonal and very humane in their everyday dealings with their teaching staff at the school. And of course, the last but not least is the values and vision of the school leaders and how do they see their schools after they are gone. That's my definition of the vision. How do I want this school to look like when I'm out of there, when I'm gone? So that's the ideas that we have from that particular project on how successful school leaders operate in Cyprus. And then bringing in the quadrant, I'm sorry it is not very legible, from another research project, the LISA project, in which Nóra made reference to the book which is just coming out from Springer publication. If we look at the in the middle where we mentioned the leadership radius, this model was developed by myself and Stefan Braukmann, a colleague from Germany with whom we worked together on this project. And in essence, we validated that school leaders in the 7 European countries that participated in the project operate through 5 leadership styles, as we call them, mainly the instructional or pedagogical style, the participative style, personnel development, entrepreneurial, and structuring. I will go into each one of them trying to see how school leaders, at least in Cyprus, which is one of the countries where the model was validated, operate using these 5 leadership styles and then forming the leadership radius, or the radius within which the school leaders act. For instance, if we take the instructional leadership style, how do school leaders try to distribute that kind of style among their teaching staff? For instance, one school leader in Cyprus, and that was representative of what effective and successful school leaders do, at least in that sense, is that they empower their teaching staff through providing in-service themselves. So once the school leaders are knowledgeable about pedagogy and classroom observation, then they provide this kind of training for their school teachers so that they enable them to become observers of each other's didactics and teaching styles within their classrooms. And then they encourage them, when they have some free periods during the teaching day of the school, to visit each other's classrooms and therefore critique and give friendly advice in a mentoring way to each other, thus enabling them to and distributing their own leadership in the instructional domain, distributing it among the teaching staff of the personnel. So through capacity building, so to speak, they distribute that kind of domain among the school. Then if we take the second style, participative style, which means becoming more inclusive, more democratic in the decision-making processes of the school. They try to develop committees within the school which decide almost executively about what should happen in a particular area. Maybe it's a curriculum committee, maybe it's relations with parents and the community committee, and they only report to the school leader, and therefore these committees make decisions about how the school should conduct their business on a daily basis. Then for personnel development style, the way that it is exercised in a distributed way in schools in Cyprus is that school leaders conduct a needs assessment survey, a very simple kind of survey at the beginning of the year, and ask their teaching staff, new and old staff, or new and returning staff, what are their greatest needs for staff development during the forthcoming year. And then through these, they try to organize from within. Due to lack of money and other resources, they find the strengths and among their staff. For instance, a school leader told me she found one of her teachers being very very knowledgeable in computers, and therefore they organize computer staff days, computer development staff days for the teaching staff in the school. Then for the entrepreneurial style, they have a particular entrepreneurial. We mean that the relationships are of the school with the rest of the community, the police, the church, NGOs that are around the area of the school, and the collaboration among these external audiences with the school. And they have particular committees, and they themselves take leadership in these among the teachers, so in a sense trying to assign to each teacher a particular responsibility to dialogue with these outside variables within for the school, and therefore try to develop this kind of collaboration and assistance. Then taking the last style, the structuring style, which for us in this particular model, it means setting clarity about rules, regulations, roles, providing the vision for the school, and that they try to do in a collaborative way, again bearing in mind that 1/3 of the teaching staff is changing from year to year, and then redeveloping this kind of vision on a year-to-year basis from within, and then trying, in a multicultural society that Cyprus is becoming, and the constant changing of the student population, to decide which values are prioritized among the staff and therefore implemented at least during the course of the year. And then I will proceed with some very snapshot, so to speak, about what do I mean it is the act of benevolent cohabitation, distributed leadership in Cyprus schools. Well, there's no rule, or law that says that school leaders should distribute or should be distributing their leadership capacities and duties among the teaching staff. When you find school leaders do it, the ones that we have been talking with that do it are the ones that really feel very capable and very self-confident to do it. Otherwise, ordinarily, school leaders are more keeping their duties and their powers to themselves, and they don't ordinarily distribute to other people because, as Olof mentioned previously, they have to reckon between the democratic authority, so to speak, and the professional responsibility. And once they know that they are finally responsible to the Ministry of Education for the execution of the various policies at the school level, they're very reluctant to delegate or distribute to anybody else. So principals, in short, in Cyprus have no responsibility with regard to the appointment of their staff. Therefore, who is there to, they need to get to know their staff in order to be able to distribute. About 1/3, as I said, will probably rotate in other schools. And then principals are responsible for developing a collaborative climate around the school. So by the time they get to know their teachers and they try to distribute, a third or half of them will be gone. However, as I mentioned, the school leaders who do distribute some of their duties and powers to the rest of the teaching community are those who are self-confident and knowledgeable, especially when it comes to pedagogical and instructional leadership that they distribute among their teaching staff once they provide some capacity, as I mentioned previously. So, in ending, I would say that what remains to be seen is if we will ever reach a formula about what the best leadership styles cocktail mix looks like for school leaders in the various European countries, or if it will remain a secret recipe for every individual principal who should be made aware of the necessary ingredients, but in the end the creation is uniquely his or her own, and then from then on to be able to distribute among the teaching personnel of the school. And then I couldn't resist the temptation to end with an ancient Greek saying by an ancient Greek poet, tragic poet of the 5th century BC. I will not read the Greek, that is in the beginning of the transparency, but it shows that this Agathon, this Greek tragic poet of the 5th century, told us something which is very important, on which I would like to end, that the leader needs to be reminded of 3 things: that he, forgive the he or not the she, that he governs humans, that he governs according to the laws, and that he will not govern forever. I think, bearing that in mind, I will conclude here, and I thank you for this opportunity to share some of my thoughts on this particular topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Petros, and the other speakers, Olof and Michael as well, and thanks for coming back for a discussion. There have been 2 questions raised by participants in the meantime. I think all of you spoke about the importance of values, and Olof emphasized that values must be shared. Jackie Lambie raises the question how feasible it is to create a shared vision when schools are increasingly diverse, including learners and families with very different value bases.
I can answer that. I think it's even more important in a situation where we have a diverse and more diverse country and schools. In those schools, the value parts are very important to talk about. And we also see that the Swedish state is trying to help the principals in lots of ways. We are giving courses for multicultural schools, and we are giving also courses about how do you treat newcomers to Sweden. And I think all that is to build up some kind of common value base. Of course, we have left the ideas that immigrants into Sweden should be assimilated to the culture. Yeah, to some extent assimilation is still there, but we also talk a lot about the multicultural society, that we should have cultures living side by side. But there are some parts in that we also have to decide that it's very important that we have a shared vision, and we can communicate to parents from different ethnic backgrounds that this is the way we think about it in Swedish schools. So I think this kind of values part is coming more and more important because of the increasing number of ethnic diversity.
If I may jump into this discussion, taking from where Olof left it, I think similar efforts are being tried out in Cyprus, very similar to what Olof described. The main difference there is that the government still does not have a policy, a formal policy about the immigrants who in the last 5 years, I would say, have been increasing dramatically in Cyprus, especially from Asia, Philippines, and other countries in the neighborhood of the Philippines, as well as from various European countries. And the teachers and the education system of Cyprus was caught by surprise. So when we see similar efforts such as Olof described, they are really organized depending on how able school leaders and their teaching staff feel. And the policy is really created at the school level without a nationally coherent educational policy on this particular issue. So in short, they are improvising. And hopefully through this improvisation, the Minister of Education is already getting some messages about forming a policy at the national level.
Thank you. Maybe staying with policy, the other question was addressed, I think, to Michael, who spoke about the collaboration between the teaching profession and policy. And about reprofessionalization, and it's Philip Wood who asked who would like to know more about how this collaboration works in practice. Michael, could you give us an example of what reprofessionalization looks like in practice?
Okay, thank you very much, Philip, for the question. I think it's a very important one, and there are 4 dimensions to this. The first, you asked me how you can see that in practice, the reprofessionalization. 4 dimensions. The first is that we have a new form of school developmental program put in practice by the National Board of Education that includes the superintendents, and that is for us it is new to define or reprofessionalize, so to speak, superintendents more as responsible people also for the practice of school development, and they are so happy to be included in this, and we have now been meeting them for a year 5 times, and it's a group of 30 Swedish-speaking superintendents in Finland, and now they are expected to work together with their principals. That's the second stage of this. They work in a new way with the principals, and then later on also the teachers are included. The second dimension of this is that the National Board of Education introduced in February this year a proposal for a new development plan. This is not a radically new idea around the world at all, but in Finland it is a new idea to more clearly engage with your school on the municipal level and on the school level with a development plan. Now everybody is expected to produce such a plan. We have seen efforts in this direction before, but this is to take this much more clearly forward. Schools are expected to do this. We try to maybe also development money will be directed and connected to this. So that's the second dimension. The third dimension concerns the universities. We have now rethought our own relation as a faculty of education in relation to the field, and when I was dean, we established a new council at the faculty, consisting of the professors of the faculty. 10. We are a small faculty, so we have only 10 professors, but we have a new council that we call a Council for Educational Research and School Development. And that's a place where we try, and this council regularly meets, and we discuss together what kind of school developmental projects we are engaged in. We have also constructed a reference organ, or what do we say, a reference group from different societal interest groups, and we meet regularly, twice a year, and discuss this. A third, the final and fourth concerns what does academic teacher education really mean? When we academized teacher education in Finland in 1974, that was the second academization. The first was done 1852 when we established our first chair in education. But the modern way of academization of teacher education occurred in 1974. But when we did that, we took over a very traditional way of understanding what educational research is about, so we did all kind of surveys during the 70s, 80s. We moved into the qualitative movement in the 80s and 90s. Now I feel that we are taking a third step, not only moving from the positivism to qualitative methods, but now we are moving to more an interventional paradigm. And now the question is, of course, what should scientific training mean in teacher education? And I think that we have to rethink how we organize theory and practice within teacher education, and how we can also support this theory and practice relation by changing what we understand by educational research. So, and I think that by establishing cooperations, developmentally oriented research cooperation with the municipalities, with the schools, with the superintendents included, we have a new arena, so to speak, where we can interact. And my hope is that, or a vision is that when we get this going, I think we are ready to reconstruct the idea of what scientific research means for teachers and for school leaders. Yes, so those four dimensions. I don't know if it's a good answer to you, but that's the answer I have at the moment.
Thank you, Michael. Actually, I was wondering when we were speaking that this in itself is also a form of distributed leadership.
Absolutely.
You involve superintendents, or the way you involve different stakeholders with the universities too.
Yes.
In a dialogue. And you all spoke. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you all spoke about these levels of leadership. Like, for example, this is a very high level. Then there is the level of the school leader with the teacher. There is the level of the teachers with the students, and etc. And I was wondering, I think it was you, maybe Michael, who spoke about how these forms of leadership or patterns of leadership influence each other horizontally, vertically, and diagonally. And I have two questions related to this. One is, what are the conditions for a certain pattern to get applied at another level? So, for example, if you apply a very distributed leadership pattern at the high level with policy and research and practice and involving superintendents, how will it be passed on to the school level, or will it, or what is the condition for that it is passed on? And in the same way, if the school leader uses a very distributed approach, will the teachers also use a distributed approach with their students?
Mm-hmm.
How do these patterns how are they repeated, or is there a reproduction pattern? And the other one is, the other question is, how all this impacts on student learning?
Can I answer? Okay. There are two dimensions. The first and most fundamental is how we see the relation, for example, between politics on the societal level and education on the organizational level. And there is not very much time here to develop what I mean by a non-hierarchical way of seeing the relation between educational policy and educational practice. But in essence, it means that yes, we need policies, we need laws, we need direction, we need focus, so to speak, but still we have to preserve or reserve sufficient, so to speak, space for decision making on all levels below the national policy, because I now see a stronger policy-oriented movement, and the stronger a policy-oriented and evaluation-based movement grows, it has severe consequences for what educational teachers' professionality means. It turns education towards technology and to a kind of technical efficiency, so to speak, and which reduces, in fact, in the end, this reduces the teacher's space to pay attention to the individual student. And that's why I'm very keen on, we are in the midst of reorganizing how we should carry out the evaluation. We are reorganizing the national evaluation of education in Finland, and we will have a new system next year, and it's not still clear how evaluational information data on the national level, how it will be used. We have seen different models in not only also in the Scandinavian countries. For example, in Sweden we have seen one model of how the national level produces evaluation data and how it is used, and so there are many models, and we have not decided yet. But the question is, in fact, the data you produce on a national level, how can it, in the end, really be used on a local, say, classroom or a school level? And there is some confusion going on also that maybe evaluation on a system level should be used for developing the system, and maybe we need different type of evaluation and developmental work in order to change, so to speak, the practice. But the non-hierarchical relation, preserving enough space for action, we need plans, but please reserve space for independent professional thinking among the teachers. With technical teachers, we do not create reflective European citizens for the future.
Can I say something in this regard?
Yes.
I think what I heard Michael saying, or I'll say my interpretation of what I heard you say, is that distributed leadership is taking place from the top to the down. Let's say top is the government, a democratically elected government, and then it distributes some of its duties, powers to be exercised by the local authorities or by the local schools. At the same time, though, when it distributes, and here again I come to Olaf's quadrant, it is doing that by using its democratic authority, that it is there democratically, but at the same time exercising professional responsibility, which means the state comes now, as was just mentioned in Finland, to organize an evaluation system or a new national evaluation agency in order to see that this distribution of its powers is exercised through professional responsibility within the democratic authority of the schools. If I so.
Petros. There is another question from Hamilton. I'm not sure if we have time to discuss, but maybe just do a very quick round about it. He's asking, so you've been suggesting that, we've been talking about the place of research in teacher education, and he would like you to suggest something which you think universities should be doing to help build the capacity of new teachers to play a role in the leadership of schools.
Yeah, all teachers in Finland have a 5-year academic education. The subject teachers for the grades children aged 13 to 18 has a 5-year education, 4 years of subject studies and 1 year of teacher education. Teachers for the grades 1 to 6 or age level 7 to 12, they also have a 5-year master's education, but more general. But the similarity between both is that they carry out these master's theses, and I think that we have used a traditional observational paradigm. The students do questionnaires, they go out, they observe, they mostly interview today school students, teachers, and describe what is going on. But I think a more interventional paradigm goes hand in hand with a new reprofessionalization, and maybe we should really I think about what some people in the technical sector, also in the medical sector, if you think about medical research or technical development, and when I have started talking with this, how do they conceive of what is scientific research, and they don't have any problems with saying that we are involved in practice and we try to make things better, and somehow we have tried in the education sector in Finland at least to be so academic, so we have been afraid of adopting an interventional paradigm, and so maybe more action research or more interventional research. This requires I don't know, is this some answer? And then Philip Woods also asked, Michael, and space for reflection and input from students too. Yes, in the end, it's all about that, and accepting a liberal education means, of course, that we do not brainwash students. We want to have critically reflecting individuals, and in that sense we of course have to create enough space for the students to develop their own thinking.
I would like to have a comment on this as well. We have in our new school law, we see that the school should be more academic, more scientific. It's said very clearly, and there are also other changes they want to introduce. So in that sense, we are also going for evidence-based teaching, and we are going for action research about trying to affect teaching. But we did a study when the law was introduced, and one of the principals said something we used as a subtitle to our report. She said, it's like building a roundabout in rush traffic. So changing school is just like building a roundabout in rush traffic. And I think this is something we also have to remember when we talk about how can we improve schools. There is a lot of things going on, and we want them to improve, and we want them to improve while they are teaching, while they are doing all the things with the students. And this is a challenge that a lot of people doesn't really think is possible to do. So you try to solve the daily problems by going on doing what you always have done, and we as researchers are telling them what you should do and how you should do things better. But we have to remember that there is education going on at the same time.
Thank you, Olof. I'm sorry, Petros, but I'm afraid that this was the last word, because we are already running out of time, over our time. So thank you very, very much, Olof, Michael, and Petros, for your presentations and for the stimulating discussion. And what I would like to propose is that the webinar will be posted on the EPNoSL portal, so anyone can review it. And then it is possible to discuss these questions further on the platform online. So I will post the questions that you asked, and we can discuss them further. And thank you very much for everyone for being here. Please join our next webinar, which is in 1 week on the 22nd of October. And the topic is Leading for Equality in a Changing Europe. And also I posted you the link to give us feedback, and we would very much appreciate that. So thank you very much, and goodbye.